The entire town packed into that bakery to watch her sign away everything she'd built, but nobody expected the door to slam open. Nobody expected him. In a frontier town where survival meant bending or breaking, Mara Ellison was about to surrender. 5 years of whispered mockery, of being told she wasn't enough, had led to this moment, a contract that promised security in exchange for her soul. But before the ink could dry, a silent mountain man stepped through that door and shattered every illusion. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The smell hit first. That's what people remembered about Mara's bakery. Not the chipped paint on the sign, not the uneven floorboards that creaked in different keys depending on where you stepped, but the smell. Cinnamon and butter and something darker, richer. Sourdough starter that had been fed and tended for 3 years straight. Apple pie that didn't apologize for itself. Mara Ellison stood behind the counter at 4:30 in the morning, flour dusted across her forearms like war paint, sweat already dampening the collar of her work shirt. The oven roared. The town of Silver Hollow wouldn't wake for another 2 hours, but bread didn't care about anyone's schedule. She pulled the fourth batch of rolls from the heat, set them on the cooling rack with practiced efficiency that came from doing the same motion 5,000 times. Her hands were scarred, small burns, old cuts that had healed crooked. Working hands, honest hands, not delicate hands, not the kind of hands you'd see in those magazines that showed up at the general store sometimes. The ones with women draped across furniture like expensive cats. Mara had stopped comparing herself to those women around the same time she'd stopped expecting anyone in Silver Hollow to see her as anything other than the baker. It was easier that way, cleaner. She was 32 years old, built solid and heavy in a way that made men look past her and women offer tight-lipped smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Her dark hair, perpetually escaping whatever bun or braid she tried to wrangle it into, framed a face that was pleasant enough if you bothered to look. Most people didn't bother. In Silver Hollow, a frontier town clinging to the edge of Montana wilderness, like a barnacle on a ship's hull, pretty had currency. Thin had value. Mara had neither, so she'd built something else instead. She'd built necessity. Every morning, the town woke up to her bread. Every celebration, births, weddings, funerals, carried her pastries. She'd made herself indispensable in the only way she knew how, through work that spoke louder than her body ever could. The bell above the door chimed. Mara didn't turn around. Only one person came in this early, and he never spoke anyway. Rowan Hale moved through the shop like smoke, silent, deliberate, taking up space without demanding attention. He was a mountain trapper, one of those men the wilderness had chewed on and spat back out, harder and quieter than before. Tall, rangy, with dark hair that needed cutting and a beard that probably needed trimming but somehow looked intentional anyway. He came down from his cabin every 2 weeks like clockwork, bought the same things, 6 sourdough rolls, 2 loaves of wheat bread, 1 apple pie, never said more than necessary. "Morning?" Mara offered, still focused on the rolls. "Morning." His voice came out rough, underused, like a door that needed oil. She wrapped his usual order without asking, muscle memory guiding her hands. Brown paper, twine tied in a simple knot. She'd done this exact routine for 5 years now, since the first time he'd walked in, dropped coins on the counter, and waited in silence while she'd stammered through pleasantries he clearly didn't want. She'd learned. Now they existed in comfortable parallel, her working, him waiting. It was almost peaceful. Mara slid the package across the counter. Their fingers didn't touch. They never did. Rowan counted out the money, exact change like always, then paused. He was looking at her. Actually looking, not through her or past her, but at her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You all right?" he asked. 3 words. A record. Mara blinked, caught off guard. "I'm fine." "Why?" He studied her for another long moment, something working behind those dark eyes, then shook his head once. "Nothing." And just like that, he was gone, the bell chiming his exit. Mara stood there, hands braced against the counter, heart doing something stupid and irregular in her chest. In 5 years, Rowan Hale had never asked her a personal question, had barely acknowledged her existence beyond the transactional necessity of commerce. "You all right?" She shook it off. Probably she looked tired. Probably she had flour on her face. Probably it meant absolutely nothing. The town started waking up around 6. Margaret Voss came in first, like always, her perfectly coiffed silver hair and pressed dress making Mara acutely aware of her own flour-dusted chaos. Margaret ran the boarding house and considered herself Silver Hollow's social authority. "Mara, dear." Margaret's smile was pleasant, empty. "I'll take 2 of the cinnamon rolls, the small ones." The small ones. Because God forbid Margaret Voss be seen buying the large, generous rolls that Mara actually took pride in. Of course. By 7, the bakery hummed with its usual morning crowd. Tom Fletcher, who ran the livery. Sarah Chen, the school teacher. Old Gerald from the mining office, who'd been buying the same corn muffin for breakfast every day since before Mara had opened the shop. They were kind enough. Polite? They paid on time and didn't cause trouble. But Mara had long ago accepted that kind enough was probably the best she'd get. She'd learned that lesson early. The memory still had teeth, even after all these years. Daniel Carver, the banker's son, who'd taken her to the summer dance when she was 19, who'd kissed her behind the church and whispered things that made her believe maybe, just maybe, someone could see past the surface. Until the next day, when she'd overheard him laughing with his friends. "It was a dare. Come on, you think I'd actually—" She'd left the dance hall, left that version of herself behind, built walls that didn't come down easy. "Mara?" She snapped back to the present. Sarah Chen was watching her with concerned eyes, one hand already reaching for her purse. "Sorry, wool gathering." Mara forced a smile. "That'll be 40 cents. The morning rush faded into the slower afternoon rhythm. Mara used the lull to prep tomorrow's dough, her hands working through the familiar motions while her mind drifted. This was enough. This bakery, this routine, this small corner of the world she'd carved out through sheer stubborn work. It had to be enough. Because wanting more, wanting to be seen, to be chosen, to matter in ways that had nothing to do with how useful she was, that path only led to hurt. The bell chimed again. Mara looked up, expecting another regular, and froze. The man in the doorway didn't belong in Silver Hollow. Everything about him screamed elsewhere. The cut of his suit, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, the shine of his shoes, the way he carried himself like someone who'd never been told no and wouldn't recognize the word if he heard it. He was handsome in that sharp, manufactured way, clean-shaven, calculating eyes that swept the bakery like he was adding up columns in a ledger. "Miss Ellison?" His voice was smooth, professional. "I'm hoping you have a moment to talk business." Mara's stomach tightened. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Not yet." He crossed to the counter, pulled out a card, and slid it across the wood. "Nathaniel Cross, Cross Hospitality Ventures. I've been hearing very interesting things about your operation here." The card was heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind of thing that cost money to print. "I'm not sure what you've heard," Mara said carefully, "but this is just a small bakery, nothing fancy." "Oh, I disagree." Nathaniel's smile was all teeth and confidence. "I've done my research, Miss Ellison. Your recipes are exceptional. Your customer loyalty is remarkable. You've built something genuine in a market that's starving for authenticity." Something in his tone made Mara's shoulders tighten. "That's kind of you to say?" "I'm not being kind. I'm being accurate." He leaned against the counter, casual, like they were old friends. "I represent a group of investors interested in regional expansion. We're looking for brands with potential, real grassroots potential, that we can develop into something significant." "Develop." Mara repeated the word slowly. "Scale up, professionalize. Take what works here and replicate it across Montana, Wyoming, maybe further." His eyes gleamed. "We're talking about turning Mara's bakery into a household name, financial security, real success." The words should have been tempting, should have been everything a struggling small business owner wanted to hear. Instead, they felt like a trap closing. "I appreciate the interest," Mara said, choosing each word carefully, "but I'm not looking to expand right now. Right now." Nathaniel latched onto that qualifier. "But circumstances change, and I'm a patient man." He straightened, adjusted his cuffs. "Think about it. I'll be in town for the next week, staying at the boarding house. We can discuss terms whenever you're ready." He left the card on the counter and walked out, that easy confidence trailing behind him like expensive cologne. Mara stared at the embossed lettering until the words stopped making sense. Cross-hospitality ventures, regional expansion, financial security. She should throw the card away. Should forget the whole conversation. But her hands were shaking, and she didn't know if it was from fear or something more dangerous. Hope. That's it. By the time Mara locked up that evening, her head was pounding. She'd spent the entire afternoon distracted, burning a batch of cookies and miscounting change twice. The card sat in her apron pocket like a stone, heavy with implications she didn't want to examine. The walk back to her apartment took 15 minutes. Mara lived above the cobbler's shop, in 2 rooms that smelled like leather and shoe polish. It was cheap. It was quiet. It was hers. She climbed the stairs, unlocked the door, and stopped. Someone had slipped an envelope under her door. Mara picked it up with numb fingers. Her name was written across the front in elegant script. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a proposal, professionally formatted, laying out exactly what Nathaniel Cross wanted: partnership, expansion, a contract that would buy out her existing business and fold it into something larger, sleeker, more profitable, and at the bottom, a number. Mara's breath caught. That much money would change everything, would erase years of scraping by, of choosing between new equipment and fixing the roof, of lying awake at 3 in the morning wondering if this month's flour shipment would bankrupt her. That much money would mean security. She read through the contract once, twice. Each time her heart sank lower. The money came with conditions: recipe standardization, translation, change everything that made her food special, brand refinement, translation, make it pretty, make it marketable, make it safe, image consultation, translation, fix yourself, be different, be less. There, buried in the professional language, was the truth she'd been expecting all along. We love what you've built, but not who built it. Mara set the contract on her small kitchen table and stood there, hands braced against the wood, breathing through the ache in her chest. This was the choice then: money and security in exchange for becoming someone else, or stay herself and keep struggling. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Mara dragged herself to the bakery on 3 hours of restless half-sleep and more coffee than was probably healthy. The routine helped. Dough didn't care about existential crises. Bread rose or it didn't, depending on whether you did the work. She was pulling the first batch of rolls when Margaret Voss arrived, earlier than usual, with 3 other women from town. Mara's stomach sank. "Good morning, Mara dear." Margaret's smile was bright, dangerous. "We heard the most interesting news. Nathaniel Cross, from Cross Hospitality? Apparently he's made you quite an offer." Small towns, nothing stayed secret. "He made a proposal," Mara said carefully. "I'm still considering it." "Considering?" One of the other women, Linda Hayes, who ran the dress shop, leaned forward eagerly. "Mara, this could be incredible for Silver Hollow. Do you know what kind of attention this would bring?" "Jobs," another woman added. "Investment, growth." "We could really put this town on the map," Margaret said, and there was steel under the sweetness now. "But only if we show potential investors that we're serious. Professional." The word landed like a slap. "Professional," Mara repeated flatly. "Well, you know." Margaret's gesture was vague, encompassing. Nathaniel mentioned that successful expansion requires certain refinements. Presentation matters, dear. Image. There it was. The thing no one wanted to say directly. "You're not the right face for success." Mara felt something cold settle in her chest. "I appreciate your concern." "It's not concern, it's practicality." Linda cut in, not unkind, just matter of fact. "This is a real opportunity, Mara. Life-changing money. But you have to be realistic about what it takes." "What it takes." Mara's voice came out quieter than she intended. "Investment in yourself." Margaret's smile was encouraging, like she was helping. "A little polish, some effort. You're a talented baker, Mara, but talent only gets you so far. You have to be willing to evolve. The women left with their pastries, still chattering about possibilities and opportunities and what Silver Hollow could become. Mara stood behind the counter, hands clenched so tight her nails cut crescents into her palms. Evolve. Refine. Fix yourself. Different words. Same message. You're not enough as you are. The pressure built over the next 3 days. Nathaniel Cross moved through Silver Hollow like a politician, shaking hands, buying drinks, painting pictures of a prosperous future. And everywhere he went, he planted the same seed. Mara's bakery could be the start of something remarkable, if she's willing to take the leap. People started looking at Mara differently, not with the polite dismissal she was used to, but with expectation, pressure. Tom Fletcher cornered her at the general store. "My daughter's been wanting to move back from Billings. If you expand, you'll need staff, right?" Sarah Chen mentioned it over coffee. "Think of what you could do with real resources. You could hire help, finally get some rest." Even old Gerald, who never talked about anything except the weather and his arthritis, brought it up. Smart business is smart business. Man's offering you a fortune. The town had decided. This was happening. And Mara, caught in the middle, felt herself being slowly crushed between what everyone else wanted and what she knew in her bones was wrong. The contract sat on her kitchen table. She'd read it so many times she had sections memorized. Recipe standardization to ensure consistent product quality across all locations, meaning take out the sourdough starter she'd been feeding for 3 years. Use commercial yeast, faster, cheaper, soulless. Streamlined menu focusing on high-margin items with broad appeal, meaning drop the weird things. The cardamom rolls, the rye bread. Anything that required explanation. Brand ambassador must maintain professional appearance standards as outlined in Appendix C, meaning lose weight, look better, be someone else. Mara sat at that table until 2 in the morning, staring at the number at the bottom of the contract. That much money would change her life. But what would be left of the life she'd built? On the 4th day, Nathaniel came to the bakery during the afternoon lull. "Have you made a decision?" he asked, settling into one of the chairs near the window. Mara wiped down the counter, buying time. "I'm still thinking." "What's there to think about?" His tone was patient, reasonable. "I'm offering you more money than you'll see in a lifetime of running this place on your own. Security, success, a chance to matter. A chance to matter." The words hit harder than they should have. "I matter now," Mara said quietly, "to the people who come here." "Do you?" Nathaniel leaned forward. "Or are you just convenient? The only option in a small town? There's a difference between being needed and being valued, Miss Ellison." Mara's hand stilled on the counter. "I've seen a dozen businesses like yours," Nathaniel continued. "Charming, authentic, doomed. You're running on passion and nostalgia, and that's admirable, but it's not sustainable. Eventually, someone else will come along, someone younger, prettier, more marketable. And when that happens, all this," he gestured around the bakery, "disappears. Because sentiment doesn't pay bills." "And your offer does," Mara said flatly. "My offer gives you control over your own future." He pulled out a pen, set it on the table between them. "All you have to do is sign. And change everything about how I work. Improve everything about how you work." His correction was smooth. "This isn't about changing who you are, Mara. It's about becoming the best version of yourself." There it was again, that polite violence. Be better, be different, be less yourself. "I need more time," Mara heard herself say. Nathaniel's smile tightened just slightly. "Time is the one thing we don't have much of. I have other opportunities, other markets, but I'm giving you first option because I believe in what you've built here." He stood, adjusted his jacket. "I'm hosting a dinner at the boarding house tomorrow night. Town leaders, potential investors. I'd like you there. 7 o'clock. We can finalize everything then." It wasn't an invitation. It was an ultimatum. He left the pen on the table. Yeah. Mara stood in her apartment that night, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin. Tomorrow night, she would walk into that dinner. Tomorrow night, the whole town would be watching. Tomorrow night, she would sign away everything she'd built, or refuse and face the consequences. She traced the edge of her jaw, the curve of her cheek, the body that had been wrong her entire life, according to everyone else. Was survival worth this? Was security worth becoming someone she didn't recognize? Her reflection had no answers. Downstairs, the cobbler's shop was silent. Outside, Silver Hollow slept, unaware that in a few hours, everything would change. Mara thought about Rowan Hale, buying his bread every 2 weeks for 5 years, never asking her to be different, never demanding she explain herself, just existing in quiet parallel. She wondered what he would think, if he knew, if he'd even care. Probably not. People like Rowan lived apart from this kind of mess, above it. Mara turned away from the mirror, away from questions she couldn't answer, and tried to sleep. She failed. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Mara went through the motions, baking, serving, smiling, while her mind spun in useless circles. At 6:30, she closed the shop. At 6:45, she was standing in her apartment, wearing the only dress she owned that wasn't a work dress. Dark blue. Simple. It didn't fit right. Too tight across the shoulders, too loose at the waist. But it would have to do. At 6:50, she was walking toward the boarding house, each step feeling like marching to her own execution. The boarding house dining room had been transformed. White tablecloths, candles, the good china that Margaret only brought out for special occasions. Nathaniel stood at the head of the table, perfectly at ease, playing host like he owned the place. Maybe he did. Maybe he owned all of them already. The town leaders were there. Margaret Voss, Tom Fletcher, the mayor, such as Silver Hollow had one, Sarah Chen, a dozen other faces, all turned toward Mara with expectation. Miss Ellison. Nathaniel's smile was warm, welcoming. I'm so glad you could join us. Mara's throat was dry. Of course. She sat where Nathaniel indicated at his right hand, positioned like a prize on display. The dinner was excruciating, course after course brought out by Margaret's staff. Conversation that danced around the real topic, everyone waiting, watching, and through it all, Nathaniel played the room like a virtuoso. He talked about vision, about growth, about Silver Hollow's potential. He made it sound inevitable. He made it sound right. And slowly, inexorably, the conversation turned to Mara. The thing about Miss Ellison's bakery, Nathaniel said, gesturing with his wine glass, is that it represents something authentic, real. In today's market, that's invaluable. People are hungry for connection. Mara's been the heart of this town for years, Margaret added, playing her part perfectly. Exactly. Nathaniel's smile was genuine seeming. And with the right support, the right refinements, she could be the heart of an entire region. There was the word again. Refinements. Of course, Nathaniel continued, success at that scale requires certain adjustments, professionalization, but I have complete faith that Mara understands what's necessary. All eyes turned to her. Mara felt her hands shaking under the table. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. Nathaniel pulled out the contract, the pen, set them in front of her with ceremony. Shall we make it official? He asked. The room held its breath. Mara stared at the papers, at the number that promised everything and cost everything, at the future she was supposed to want. Her hand reached for the pen, and the door slammed open. The crash was so sudden, so violent, that half the room jumped. Rowan Hale stood in the doorway. He looked wrong here, wild, out of place, his rough work clothes and untrimmed beard a sharp contrast to the refined dinner party. His chest was heaving like he'd been running. His eyes found Mara. Then he crossed the room in 3 long strides and dropped something heavy on the table, a leather pouch. It hit the wood with a solid thunk that made the candles flicker. How much does she owe? Rowan's voice was rough, raw, loud in the shocked silence. Nathaniel recovered first. I'm sorry, do I know you? How much? Rowan repeated, not looking at him, still locked on Mara. This is a private dinner. I asked a question. Rowan's tone didn't rise, but something in it made Nathaniel stop talking. How much money does Mara owe for her bakery? She doesn't owe anything, Nathaniel said carefully. This is a business opportunity. Then she doesn't need your contract. Rowan opened the pouch, and gold coins spilled across the white tablecloth. Whatever she needs, I'll cover it. Equipment, repairs, supplies, whatever. The room was frozen. Mara couldn't breathe. This is highly irregular, Margaret started, but Rowan cut her off. I've been coming to that bakery for 5 years. His words came out halting, like he was pulling them up from somewhere deep. 5 years, and I never said what I should have said. Never told her what I saw. Rowan, Mara's voice cracked. He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her chest tight. I'm not good with words, he said. Never have been. But I know bullshit when I hear it. He turned to Nathaniel. You don't want her bakery. You want the idea of it, the story, the image of some heartwarming success. But you want it sanitized, packaged, safe. I'm offering Miss Ellison an opportunity. You're offering her a cage. Rowan's voice was hard now. Dressed up with money and promises, but still a cage. You want her to change her recipes, change how she looks, change who she is, and you're calling it improvement. The words landed like punches. Nathaniel's professional smile was slipping. I don't think you understand the realities of business. I understand you've spent this whole week telling Mara she's not good enough. Rowan's hands were shaking now, but his voice stayed steady, making her doubt herself, making this whole town pressure her into giving up everything that makes her work matter. He looked back at Mara. But I've watched you for 5 years. I've seen how people come into that bakery tired and leave smiling. I've seen you remember every regular's name, their orders, their kids' birthdays. I've seen you stay up all night baking for old Gerald when his wife died because you knew he'd forget to eat otherwise. Mara's eyes were burning. You don't need to change, Rowan said quietly. You don't need to be refined or packaged or made acceptable. You're already everything this place needs. Everything He stopped, swallowed hard. Everything you should be. The silence stretched out, fragile. Then Nathaniel laughed. It was a sharp, dismissive sound. How touching, he said. But Miss Ellison is a businesswoman. She understands that sentiment doesn't pay bills, that passion doesn't ensure survival. He pushed the contract toward Mara. This is security. This is success. Real, tangible success. Mara stared at the paper, then at the money Rowan had dropped on the table, then at Rowan himself, standing there shaking and fierce and more honest than anyone had been in weeks. Something crystallized in her chest. No, she said. Nathaniel blinked. I'm sorry? No. Mara stood up, her legs unsteady but holding. I'm not signing your contract. Mara, be reasonable, Margaret started. I am being reasonable. Mara's voice was stronger now. You're asking me to trade everything I've built for money. You're asking me to become someone else, someone smaller, someone more palatable, and you're calling it opportunity. She picked up the contract with both hands and tore it in half. The ripping sound was obscenely loud. Miss Ellison, Nathaniel's voice had gone cold. I suggest you reconsider. Without this deal, your bakery will fail. I'll make sure of it. I'll open my own location in this town, and I'll price you out of existence. Then I'll fail honestly, Mara said, as myself. She looked at Rowan, whose expression was doing something complicated between proud and terrified. Then she walked out of that dining room, out of the boarding house, into the cool night air. Behind her, she heard Nathaniel's raised voice, Margaret's shocked protests, the scrape of chairs. She didn't look back. Mara walked until she reached her bakery, until she was standing in front of the shop she'd built with her own hands, her own work, her own stubborn refusal to quit. And for the first time in weeks, she could breathe. The door behind her opened. Rowan stood there, silhouetted against the street lamp, that leather pouch still clutched in one hand. You didn't have to do that, Mara said quietly. Yes, I did. He stepped closer, hesitant. I've been watching you for 5 years. Never said anything because I figured you had enough people talking at you, figured maybe silence was better. It was, Mara admitted, most of the time. But not tonight. Rowan looked at his boots. Tonight I had to say something. Had to make sure you knew. Knew what? He finally met her eyes. That you're enough. Exactly as you are. That you've always been enough. Something in Mara's chest cracked open. All those years of being told to change, to improve, to fix herself. And here was someone saying the opposite. Not because he wanted something from her, not because he was trying to win an argument, just because it was true. I don't know what happens now, Mara said. Her voice shook. Nathaniel meant it. He'll come after me. After this place. Then we fight. Rowan said it simply, like it was obvious. We? If you want. He shifted, uncomfortable with his own boldness. I'm not good at this, at talking, at people. But I know how to work, how to fix things. And I know... He stopped, started again. I know I don't want to watch you fight alone. Mara looked at this man who'd been a silent fixture in her life for 5 years, who'd just walked into a room full of town leaders and torn apart their expectations, who was offering help without conditions, support without demands. Okay, she whispered. Okay. And there, in front of the bakery that smelled like cinnamon and hope, Mara Ellison made a choice. Not for money, not for security, not for what everyone else said she should want, but for herself. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. Mara didn't sleep that night either, but for different reasons. She sat at her kitchen table, watching the sky fade from black to gray, her mind replaying the moment she'd torn that contract in half. The sound of it, the way Nathaniel's face had gone tight and cold, the weight of every eye in that room, the look on Rowan's face when she'd walked out. Her hands were still shaking. She'd just turned down more money than she'd see in a lifetime. She'd made an enemy of a man with resources and spite. She'd disappointed an entire town that had already decided her future. And somehow, sitting there in the pre-dawn quiet, she didn't regret it. The fear was there, sharp and real. But underneath it, something else. Relief. At 4:30, she went down to the bakery. The routine steadied her, measuring flour, feeding the starter, heating the ovens. Work didn't care about drama. Bread rose or it didn't. She was pulling the first batch of rolls when she heard footsteps on the back stairs. Rowan stood in the doorway, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen him before. Thought you might could use help, he said. Mara blinked. You know how to bake? No. He shifted his weight. But I can follow instructions. Something about that, his admission of ignorance, his willingness anyway, made Mara's throat tight. All right, she said. Wash your hands. Water's hot. They worked in near silence, Rowan learning through watching, Mara falling into the rhythm of teaching without meaning to. He was clumsy at first, his large hands too rough for delicate work, but he listened, adjusted. Tried again. Not like that, Mara said, reaching over to show him how to fold the dough properly. Gentle. You're not wrestling it. Rowan's hand stilled under hers. Sorry. Don't apologize, just feel it. The dough tells you what it needs. He glanced at her, something complicated crossing his face. Does it? Yeah. Mara pulled back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. You just have to pay attention. The morning customers started arriving around 6. Their reactions to Rowan's presence ranged from curious to hostile. Tom Fletcher did a double take. Sarah Chen raised her eyebrows but said nothing. Margaret Voss walked in, saw Rowan kneading dough behind the counter, and turned around without buying anything. That's going to be a problem, Mara muttered, watching Margaret's stiff back retreat down the street. Let it, Rowan said. Easy for him to say. He lived up in the mountains, away from town politics and social warfare. But Mara had to exist here. The morning rush was slower than usual. People came in, but the conversations were stilted, careful. Nobody mentioned last night directly, but it hung in the air like smoke. Around 10, the bell chimed, and Nathaniel Cross walked in. He looked immaculate as always, but there was steel in his smile now. Miss Ellison, he said pleasantly. I hope you've had time to reconsider. Mara's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice level. I haven't. That's unfortunate. Nathaniel glanced around the bakery, his gaze cataloging, assessing. I meant what I said last night. I'm opening a competing location. I've already secured a property on Main Street. Construction starts Monday. Main Street, Mara repeated, right in the center of town, prime location. I'll be offering everything you offer, but better, cleaner, more professional. His smile sharpened. And I'll be pricing aggressively, very aggressively. It was a declaration of war, delivered with perfect politeness. Rowan stepped out from the back room, flour still dusting his forearms. He didn't say anything, just positioned himself near Mara. A presence. Nathaniel's eyes flicked to him, dismissive. The money I offered would have set you up for life, Miss Ellison. Instead, you chose pride. I hope it keeps you warm when this place goes under. He left, the bell chiming his exit like punctuation. Mara stood there, hands braced against the counter, breathing through the spike of panic. He's bluffing, Rowan said quietly. He's not. Mara's voice came out flat. He's got the money to do exactly what he said, and this town, she gestured vaguely at the empty shop. They want what he's selling, progress, refinement, something better than me. Then we make them want what you're selling more. How? The word came out sharper than she intended. I can't compete with unlimited money and a professional operation. I'm one person, Rowan. One person with old equipment and a building that needs repairs I can't afford. You're not one person. Rowan's jaw was tight. Not anymore. Mara looked at him, this man who'd been a ghost in her life for 5 years, now suddenly impossibly present. Why are you doing this? She asked. Really, you don't owe me anything. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, the words came slow, careful. 5 years ago, I came down from the mountain because I was out of flour. Stopped in here because it was close. He looked at his hands. You were singing, some old song, off key. You didn't hear me come in. And when you finally noticed me, you didn't look scared or disgusted, just smiled and asked what I needed. Mara didn't remember that day specifically, didn't remember the song. Most people look at me like I'm something dangerous, Rowan continued, or broken. You just looked at me like I was a customer, like I was normal. You are normal, Mara said automatically. No, I'm not. His voice was quiet, matter of fact. I've been up in those mountains for 15 years because I can't stomach being around people most of the time. Can't handle the noise, the expectations. But every 2 weeks I'd come down here, and for 10 minutes I could just exist without having to be anything. He finally met her eyes. You gave me that, he said. Never asked questions, never pushed, just let me be. So yeah, maybe I don't owe you anything, but I want to help anyway, because for 5 years you've been the only person who made the world feel less sharp. Mara's throat closed up. All those mornings, wrapping his order in silence, she'd thought it was just transaction, just business. She'd had no idea it meant anything. Okay, she whispered. Okay, then we fight. The war started small. Monday morning, construction crews arrived on Main Street. By noon, the sound of hammering echoed through Silver Hollow. By evening, a sign went up, Cross Bakery, opening soon. Mara watched from her window, stomach churning. Rowan found her there, staring at the skeletal framework going up across town. It's big, she said unnecessarily. Size isn't everything. Easy to say when you're not being crushed by it. Rowan didn't argue, just stood beside her, solid and quiet. That night, they sat at Mara's kitchen table, surrounded by papers, bills, supply orders, a rough accounting of her finances that made her want to cry. I've got about 3 months, Mara said, running the numbers again. Maybe 4 if I cut costs. After that, if business drops. She didn't finish the sentence. What if we don't let it drop? Rowan asked. How? Nathaniel's going to undercut my prices. He's got better equipment, better location, better everything. But he doesn't have your recipes. Mara shook her head. Recipes can be copied, improved even, with the right equipment. Not the way you make them. Rowan leaned forward. I've had bread from other places. It's fine. It's bread. But yours is different. It tastes like, I don't know, like someone gives a damn. Despite everything, Mara almost smiled. That's not exactly a marketing strategy. Why not? She looked at him. Because caring doesn't scale, Rowan. That's the whole point. What makes this place work is that I know my customers. I remember what they like. I adjust recipes based on who's buying. You can't do that in a big operation. Then don't get big. Rowan's voice was firm. Do the opposite. Get smaller, more personal. Make it so people can't get what you're offering anywhere else. I already do that. No, you try to do everything. Regular menu, special orders, catering. You're spread thin. He pulled out a pencil, started scribbling on the back of an envelope. What if you focused, dropped the stuff anyone can make, and doubled down on the things only you can do? Mara stared at his rough sketch, a simplified menu, half the items, but twice the attention. That's insane, she said. Less variety means fewer customers. Or more loyal ones. Rowan tapped the paper. People who come because they can't get that sourdough anywhere else. Can't get those cardamom rolls. The weird stuff you make that nobody else even tries. The weird stuff doesn't sell well. Because you hide it. You make 6 regular loaves and 2 sourdough, then wonder why people buy the regular. What if you only made sourdough? What if that's what you became known for? Mara wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the reasons it wouldn't work. But there was a logic to it, a strange, risky logic. It would take time, she said slowly, to build that reputation, to convince people to pay more for specialty items. How much time do you have? 3 months. Maybe. Then we start tomorrow. Mara looked at this man who'd barely spoken to her for 5 years, now plotting business strategy at her kitchen table like it was the most natural thing in the world. Why do you care this much? She asked again. Rowan's pencil stilled. Because watching you give up would be worse than anything Nathaniel could build. The next morning, Mara halved her regular menu and tripled her sourdough production. The customers noticed immediately. Where are the regular sandwich loaves? Linda Hayes demanded. Discontinued, Mara said, trying to sound confident. I'm focusing on artisan breads now. Artisan? Linda made it sound like a disease. Mara, people want normal bread. Then they can buy it at the general store or wait for Cross Bakery to open. Linda left without buying anything. So did the next 3 customers. By noon, Mara had sold exactly 2 loaves and was fighting the urge to panic. This was a mistake, she muttered, staring at the racks of unsold sourdough. It's day 1, Rowan said. He was repairing a wobbly table in the corner, his presence in the shop now a constant. Change takes time. Time I don't have. The bell chimed. Old Gerald shuffled in, moving slow like always. Morning, Gerald, Mara said, forcing brightness. I'm afraid I don't have your usual corn muffin today. Menu changes. Gerald squinted at the display case. What's that dark one? Rye sourdough. It's got caraway seeds, bit of a sour tang. I'll take it. Mara blinked. Really? Been eating the same damn muffin for 5 years. Gerald pulled out his coin purse. Might as well try something new before I die. It was such a small thing. 1 loaf, 1 customer. But Mara felt something shift. She sold 3 more loaves that afternoon. Not to regulars, but to newcomers. A traveling merchant who'd heard about the sourdough from someone passing through, a couple from the next town over who were curious about the mountain bakery. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But it was something. That night, Rowan brought down supplies from his cabin. A bag of wild huckleberries he'd preserved, honey from a hive he'd been tending, herbs he'd dried. What's this for? Mara asked. You said you needed to make things people can't get anywhere else. He set the items on her counter. Can't get more unique than this. Mara stared at the ingredients. Her mind was already working, combining flavors, imagining possibilities. Huckleberry sourdough, she murmured. Honey oat bread with wild thyme. See? Rowan's almost smile was back. You don't need fancy equipment. You need things nobody else has access to. They worked late into the night, Mara testing recipes while Rowan chopped wood for the oven, fixed the broken shelf she'd been meaning to repair for months, replaced the rotting boards on the back step. Around midnight, Mara pulled a test loaf from the oven, huckleberry sourdough, the berries creating purple swirls through the crumb. She sliced it, handed a piece to Rowan. He ate it slowly, thoughtfully. Well? Mara asked. It's good. He paused. Better than good. It tastes like the mountain. Something about the way he said it, simple, honest, made Mara believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. The next week was brutal. Mara's regular customer base dropped by half. People who'd been coming for years suddenly found excuses to shop elsewhere. Margaret Voss made a pointed comment at the general store about impractical menu choices. Tom Fletcher mentioned that his wife preferred reliable bakeries. The message was clear: conform or be abandoned. But something else was happening too. Word was spreading about the specialty breads. A food critic passing through Silver Hollow on his way to Billings stopped in, tried the Wild Time honey loaf, and wrote about it in the regional paper. A wealthy rancher from 3 towns over sent his foreman to buy 6 loaves of the huckleberry sourdough for a dinner party. Mara's volume was lower, but her margins were higher. It still wasn't enough to offset the losses, but it was keeping her alive. And then Cross Bakery opened. The grand opening was everything Mara's shop wasn't: polished, professional, gleaming display cases full of perfect pastries arranged with precision, employees in matching uniforms, Nathaniel himself standing at the entrance greeting customers like a politician. Half the town showed up. Mara watched from her window as people streamed in and out, carrying bags stamped with the Cross Bakery logo. "Don't look," Rowan said quietly. He'd started staying in town more often, sleeping in the small storage room behind the bakery instead of making the trek back to his cabin. "Can't help it," Mara said. "That's my funeral procession. It's an opening day, novelty, doesn't mean anything yet." But it did mean something. It meant competition she couldn't match. It meant Nathaniel had made good on his threat. The first week after Cross Bakery opened, Mara's sales dropped 40%. The second week, 50%. She started cutting costs wherever she could, turned off the heat in her apartment, wore 2 sweaters instead, skipped meals, bought the cheapest flour she could find even though it made her physically ill to compromise on ingredients. Rowan noticed. Of course he noticed. "You're not eating," he said one morning, watching her wrap a loaf for a customer. "I'm fine." "You're lying." The customer left. Mara turned to face him. "I'm trying to keep this place alive," she said. "That means sacrifices." "Not that kind." Rowan disappeared into the back room, returned with a basket. Inside were eggs, smoked meat, fresh vegetables. "From my supplies. Don't argue." Mara wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some shred of pride, but she was so tired, and the food looked so good. "Thank you," she whispered. That night they ate together in her apartment, a simple meal, but the first real food Mara had had in days. Rowan cooked, surprisingly competent with a skillet. "Where'd you learn to cook?" Mara asked. "Mountain. You learn or you starve." He flipped the eggs with practiced ease. "Spent my first year up there eating charcoal and calling it food. Got better out of necessity." "Why did you go up there, to the mountain?" Rowan was quiet for a long time. Mara thought he wouldn't answer. "War," he finally said. "Came back wrong. Couldn't be around people anymore. Sounds, crowds, expectations. It all felt like drowning. So I went somewhere quiet." "And you've been there for 15 years. "Yeah." Mara studied his profile, the hard lines, the scars she'd noticed but never asked about. "Do you miss it? The before?" "Sometimes." He slid the eggs onto plates. "But mostly I just miss feeling like a person instead of a problem." "You're not a problem," Mara said. "Neither are you." Rowan met her eyes. "But we've both spent a lot of years being told otherwise, haven't we?" The accuracy of it stole her breath. They ate in comfortable silence, and for the first time in weeks, Mara felt something other than fear. She felt understood. The third week after Cross Bakery opened, Nathaniel came back. "Miss Ellison," he said, all false courtesy. "I wanted to check in, see how you're managing." The shop was nearly empty, 2 customers all morning. "I'm fine," Mara lied. "Are you?" Nathaniel glanced around pointedly. "Because my numbers suggest otherwise. I'm moving 30% more volume than projected, and that volume has to be coming from somewhere." "From me," Mara thought. "It's coming from me." "My offer still stands," Nathaniel continued. "Modified, of course. Given the current circumstances, I'd be willing to pay you for your recipes. Not ownership, just the formulas. You could work for me. Reasonable salary, benefits. Work for him. In the business he'd built to destroy her." "No," Mara said. "Pride is expensive, Miss Ellison." Nathaniel's voice went cold. "How many more weeks can you afford it?" "As many as it takes." He laughed, sharp and ugly. You're delusional. In a month, maybe 2, you'll be bankrupt. And when that happens, I'll buy this building for pennies. Turn it into storage for my operation."
"Get out," Mara said quietly. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my shop." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake."
"Wouldn't be my first." He left, but his words lingered like poison. A month, maybe 2. Mara looked at her ledger, at the numbers that didn't lie. He was right. She was drowning. That night, she broke, sat at her kitchen table and cried, ugly, gasping sobs that she'd been holding back for weeks. All the fear, all the exhaustion, all the crushing weight of trying and failing. Rowan found her like that. He didn't say anything, just pulled up a chair and sat beside her, one rough hand settling on her shoulder. "I can't do this," Mara choked out. "I can't compete. I can't win. I'm going to lose everything." "Maybe," Rowan said quietly. "But not tonight. Tonight you're still here, still fighting. For what? So I can drag this out another few weeks before the inevitable? So you can prove you didn't quit." His voice was firm. "So when it ends, if it ends, you know you fought as hard as you could." Mara looked at him through blurry eyes. "Why does that matter?" "Because regret's worse than failure." Rowan's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Trust me on that." She didn't have the energy to argue, but his words settled into her chest, heavy and true. The 4th week, something changed. Sarah Chen came in, hesitant. "I've been going to Cross Bakery," she admitted. "It's closer to the school, more convenient." Mara's stomach sank. "It's fine, Sarah, I understand." "But their bread is—" Sarah paused, searching for words. "It's fine, it's bread, but it doesn't taste like anything." And I realized I missed this. Missed coming in and you asking about my students. Missed feeling like I was supporting someone who actually cares. She bought 2 loaves of the huckleberry sourdough. Later that day, old Gerald came in. "Tried that fancy place," he grunted. "Too clean. Don't trust it. Give me the rye." Then Tom Fletcher's daughter, back from Billings. "My dad said you were struggling, told me I should come here instead of the new place." She smiled apologetically. "He won't say it himself, but he feels bad about the whole thing, about pressuring you." One by one, people started trickling back. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to hope. That night, Mara counted the day's receipts, still down from her pre-cross numbers, but better than last week, better than drowning. Rowan was repairing the oven door, his back to her. "People are coming back," Mara said quietly. "Told you, size isn't everything. We're not out of this yet." "No," Rowan agreed. "But we're still in it." Mara watched him work, methodical, patient, fixing what was broken without complaint. This man who'd upended his entire life to help her fight a battle that wasn't even his. "Rowan," she said. He turned. "Why are you really doing this?" He set down his tools, crossed the small space between them. "Because 5 years ago, you let me exist," he said. "And 3 weeks ago, I watched them try to erase you, and I couldn't—" He stopped, jaw working. "I couldn't let that happen. Couldn't stand back and watch you disappear." "I'm not that important," Mara whispered. "You are to me." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Mara's heart was doing something painful in her chest. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "How to let someone help, how to trust that you won't leave when this gets harder." "It's already hard," Rowan said. "I'm still here. For now. For as long as you'll let me." Mara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd been too scared to acknowledge. This wasn't just about the bakery. It never had been. "Okay," she said. "Okay." And in the quiet of the shop that smelled like bread and hope, something shifted between them. Something that felt dangerously like trust. The battle wasn't over. Nathaniel was still there, still competing, still waiting for her to fail. But for the first time in weeks, Mara felt like maybe she could survive it. Not alone, but with someone who'd chosen to stand beside her, even when walking away would have been easier. And that made all the difference. The fragile peace lasted exactly 6 days. Mara was starting to believe, not in victory, but in survival. Her sales had stabilized. Not thriving, but steady enough to keep the lights on and the ovens hot. A few more customers had drifted back, sheepish but loyal. She'd even managed to pay her flour supplier on time for the first time in a month. Then the health inspector showed up. He appeared on a Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand, expression professionally neutral. Routine inspection, he said, but his eyes were already cataloging violations. Mara's stomach dropped. She kept the place clean, obsessively so. But the building was old, the equipment older. There were cracks she'd patched, surfaces that needed replacing, a ventilation system held together with prayer and mechanical wire. Rowan was at the general store picking up supplies. She was alone. The inspector moved through the bakery with meticulous slowness, noting every imperfection: the uneven floorboard, the outdated fire extinguisher, the oven door that didn't seal quite right, the same door Rowan had been repairing in stages because they couldn't afford to replace it. "This ventilation system," the inspector said, tapping his pencil against the hood above the stove. "When was it last serviced?" Mara's mind went blank. 3 years ago? Maybe 4? Code requires annual inspection and certification. He made a note. "And this oven, it works fine," Mara said quickly. "I've been baking with it for 5 years without issue." "The seal is compromised. That's a fire hazard." Another note. "And these shelving units aren't anchored to the wall. Seismic safety violation." "We don't have earthquakes here." "Code is code, ma'am." He went through every inch of the space, finding faults Mara didn't even know existed. By the time he finished, his clipboard was covered in violations. "I'm going to have to issue a citation," he said, tearing off a yellow form. "You have 30 days to address these issues and schedule a re-inspection. If the violations aren't corrected, I'll have no choice but to suspend your operating license." The form listed 12 separate violations. The estimated cost to fix everything sat at the bottom like a death sentence: $4,000. Mara took the citation with numb fingers. The inspector left. She stood there, staring at the yellow paper, and felt something break inside her chest. $4,000 might as well have been $4 million. She didn't have it, couldn't get it, and without it, the bakery would be shut down in 30 days. Rowan found her like that 20 minutes later, still standing in the same spot, the citation clutched in her hand. "What happened?" He set down the supply bags, crossed to her in 2 strides. Mara handed him the paper wordlessly. She watched his expression darken as he read through the list. "This is bullshit," he said flatly. "Half these violations are cosmetic, and the ventilation system, that's not even close to a health risk. Doesn't matter if it's fair, it's code." Mara's voice came out hollow. "And I can't afford to fix it." "How much?" $4,000. Minimum. Probably more once we actually start the work." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he folded the citation and slipped it into his pocket. "We'll figure it out," he said. "How?" Mara heard her voice rising. "I'm barely keeping this place afloat as is. There's no figuring this out, Rowan. This is it. This is how I lose." "No." His voice was firm. "This is how Nathaniel tries to make you lose. You think this inspection was random?" The thought had crossed her mind, but saying it out loud felt paranoid. "He probably paid someone off," Rowan continued, "or called in a favor. Doesn't matter. What matters is we don't let it work." "With what money?" Mara pulled away from him, pacing the small shop. "I've already cut every expense I can. I'm living on your charity and day-old bread. There's nothing left to cut." "Then we find another way." "There is no other way." The words exploded out of her. "This is over, Rowan. I fought. I tried. And I'm still losing." The silence that followed felt like a wound. Rowan stood there, jaw tight, something working behind his eyes. "I have money," he said quietly. Mara stopped pacing. "What?" "Up at the cabin. I've been trapping for 15 years, selling furs, meat, whatever the mountain provides. I don't spend much, just supplies. Most of it's just sitting there." "How much?" "Enough." Mara's throat closed. "I can't take your money, Rowan." "Why not?" "Because," she struggled for words. "Because I can't pay you back. Because it's yours. Because I've already taken so much from you and I can't—" "I'm offering," Rowan interrupted, "not as a loan, as an investment. In a failing bakery. In you." The words hit like a physical thing. Mara looked at this man who'd already given her so much, his time, his labor, his presence, when she had nothing to offer in return. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" Rowan crossed the space between them slowly, like he was approaching something wild that might bolt. "Because watching you build this place," he said, "watching you create something real and good in a world that's mostly neither, that's been the best part of my last 5 years. And the thought of it being taken from you by some bastard with money and spite," his hands curled into fists. "I won't let that happen, not if I can stop it." Mara's eyes burned. "And if we lose anyway? If we fix all this and it's still not enough? Then at least we'll know we fought with everything we had." She wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from the inevitable disappointment, but she was so tired, and the alternative was surrender. "Okay," she said. "Okay." They went up to Rowan's cabin that afternoon. Mara had never been to the mountain before. The trail was steep, winding through pine forests that grew denser and quieter the higher they climbed. No sounds except their footsteps and the occasional bird call. The cabin sat in a small clearing, backed against a granite cliff face. It was smaller than Mara expected, one room, essentially, with a sleeping loft and a stone fireplace. But it was solid, well built, the kind of place that could withstand Montana winters without complaint. "Wait here," Rowan said, disappearing into the cabin. Mara stood in the clearing, looking at the valley spread out below. Silver Hollow was a scatter of buildings in the distance, small and contained. From up here, her problem seemed smaller too, more manageable. It was an illusion, but a comforting one. Rowan emerged carrying a wooden box, worn smooth from handling. He set it on the porch steps, opened it. Inside was money. More money than Mara had seen in one place in her entire life. Bills and coins sorted into careful stacks. 15 years, Rowan said quietly. Never had much reason to spend it. Mara stared at the money, then at Rowan. "This is everything you have." "Yeah." "And you're just going to give it to me?" "To us," he corrected her gently. "If we're doing this, we're doing it together." Something shifted in Mara's chest, a weight settling into place. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about choosing to be vulnerable when every instinct screamed to protect yourself. "What if I let you down?" she asked. "What if you don't?" They carried the box down the mountain together. The repairs started the next day. Rowan knew a contractor who owed him a favor, something about a roof repair during a bad winter, and the man agreed to do the work at cost. Still expensive, but manageable with Rowan's money. The bakery became a construction zone. Mara kept baking us the early mornings before the workers arrived, then spent the days covered in dust and noise, watching her shop get torn apart and rebuilt. It should have been stressful, should have felt like one more thing falling apart. Instead, it felt like progress. The new ventilation system went in first. Then the shelving got anchored properly. The oven door was replaced with one that actually sealed. Cracks were filled, surfaces refinished, the whole place scrubbed and sanitized within an inch of its life. By the end of the second week, Mara's bakery looked better than it had in years. And Nathaniel noticed. He appeared on a Friday afternoon, stepping carefully around the construction debris. "Impressive," he said, his tone suggesting the opposite. "I heard you'd failed inspection. Surprised to see you still operating." "Surprised I found the money to fix things?" Mara asked. "Frankly, yes." His eyes swept the space, calculating. "Must have been quite an investment." "It was worth it." Nathaniel's smile went sharp. "Was it? Because from where I'm standing, you've just dumped thousands of dollars into a building you don't own. Your lease is what, year to year? And the landlord, Mr. Patterson, isn't it? He's been talking about selling." Mara's stomach dropped. "What? Oh, you didn't know?" Nathaniel's false concern was worse than his hostility. "He mentioned it to me last week, considering his options. I told him I might be interested in purchasing the property. For the right price, of course." The implications crashed over Mara like cold water. Even if she fixed everything, even if she survived the inspection, even if her business stabilized, none of it mattered if she lost the building. "You can't do that," she said, but the words came out weak. "Can't I? It's a free market, Miss Ellison. If Patterson wants to sell and I want to buy..." He shrugged. "That's just business. That's sabotage." That's capitalism. Nathaniel adjusted his cuffs. But I'm not unreasonable. I'd be willing to lease you space in one of my properties. Commercial rate, of course. You could keep operating under new terms. There it was. The trap closing. Work for him. Pay him rent. Exist at his mercy. Get out, Mara said. I'm just offering options. Get out of my shop before I throw you out. Nathaniel's expression hardened. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Good. He left, but his words lingered like poison. Mara found Rowan in the back, installing the new fire extinguisher. Patterson's selling the building, she said without preamble. Rowan's hands stilled. You're sure? Nathaniel just told me, probably trying to buy it so he can evict me. Then we buy it first. Mara laughed, a bitter sound. With what? We just spent everything we had on repairs. I've got a little left, not enough to buy a building. Mara slumped against the wall. And Patterson won't sell to me anyway, not when Nathaniel's probably offering twice what it's worth. So we convince him. How? Rowan thought for a moment. Patterson's wife died 2 years ago. Pneumonia. He was devastated. I remember. Mara had made food for the funeral, bread and casseroles that Patterson barely touched. She loved your cinnamon rolls, Rowan said. Used to come in every Sunday morning, buy 2. One for then, one for later. Mara's chest tightened. I remember that too. Then remind him. Rowan's voice was firm. Remind him what this place meant to her, what it means to the town. Make him see that selling to Nathaniel isn't just a business decision. It's erasing something his wife cared about. It was emotional manipulation, using a dead woman's memory to influence a business deal. It was also their only shot. Mara found Patterson at his house that evening. He answered the door looking older than she remembered, worn down by loneliness and grief. Mara, he said, surprised. Everything all right with the building? Can I come in? He led her to a kitchen that still had 2 place settings at the table, like he couldn't bring himself to put one away. Mr. Patterson, Mara started, then stopped. The rehearsed speech died in her throat. Instead, she told the truth. I heard you're thinking about selling the building, she said, and I heard Nathaniel Cross made you an offer. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. He did. Good offer, too. More than the place is probably worth. I can't match it, Mara admitted. I don't have that kind of money, but I wanted to ask you to sell to me anyway. Mara, your wife used to come to my bakery every Sunday, Mara continued. She'd buy 2 cinnamon rolls and she'd tell me about her week, about the garden she was planting, about the book club she'd started, about you. Patterson's eyes went shiny. She told me once that my bakery was the only place in Silver Hollow that felt like home, Mara said, that walking in there made her feel cared for. And I hope, that's because I actually did care. About her. About everyone who walks through that door. It's not just business to me, Mr. Patterson. It's never been just business. I know that, Patterson said quietly. Nathaniel will turn that building into profit, Mara said. Which is fine. That's what buildings are for. But it won't be what your wife loved. It won't be the place she felt at home. It'll just be square footage. Patterson was quiet for a long time, staring at those 2 place settings. How much can you offer? He finally asked. Mara named a number. It was everything she and Rowan had left, plus what she could maybe scrape together if she sold everything she owned. It was insultingly low compared to Nathaniel's offer. That's what I thought, Patterson said. But he didn't sound angry, just tired. Let me think on it. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Mara left feeling like she'd just thrown her last coin into a wishing well. The re-inspection happened 3 days later. The same inspector came back, clipboard in hand, wearing the same neutral expression. But this time he couldn't find anything wrong. The ventilation system passed. The oven passed. The shelving, the flooring, the fire safety equipment, everything passed. He signed off on the form, handed Mara her copy, and left without ceremony. Mara stood there, holding the approval, and felt tears threatening. One battle won, but the war wasn't over. That night, Patterson came to the bakery. Mara was closing up, Rowan sweeping the floor. They both stopped when the old man walked in. I've made a decision, Patterson said without preamble. About the building. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. I'm selling to Cross, Patterson continued, and Mara felt the world tilt. He offered $50,000. That's more than I ever thought I'd see for that place. Mr. Patterson, Mara started, but he held up a hand. But, he said, my wife would have wanted you to have it. She believed in what you're doing here. Believed in you. He pulled out a folded paper. So I'm selling to Cross, and then I'm using that money to buy you a different property. There's a place on Maple Street, smaller but solid. I'll buy it and lease it to you for what you offered. Dollar for dollar. You can pay it off over time. Mara couldn't breathe. Why would you do that? Because my wife was right about you, Patterson said. You care, and that matters more than I gave it credit for. He set the paper on the counter, a lease agreement, already drawn up. Besides, Cross can have that old building. Plumbing's a nightmare and the roof needs work. You're better off somewhere else. He left before Mara could find words to thank him. She stood there, staring at the lease, and felt something impossible blooming in her chest. Hope. Real hope. Rowan picked up the paper, read through it carefully. This is good, he said. Really good. Rent's reasonable. Terms are fair. And Maple Street, that's actually better foot traffic than here. We'd have to move everything, Mara said, her mind already spinning. The ovens, the equipment, all the inventory. So we move. Rowan's almost smile was back. Did it before. Can do it again. Mara looked around the bakery that had been her whole world for 5 years. The cracked tiles she'd memorized, the uneven counter she'd learned to work around, the smell of bread baked into the walls. Leaving felt like amputation, but staying meant losing anyway. Okay, she said. Let's move. The next 2 weeks were chaos. They packed everything that could be packed, hired a wagon to transport what couldn't. The new space on Maple Street was smaller but brighter, with better windows and a layout that actually made sense. Rowan worked like a man possessed, installing equipment, building new shelving, fixing problems Mara didn't even know they had. His carpentry skills turned out to be extensive. The mountain had taught him self-sufficiency in 100 different ways. Where'd you learn to do this? Mara asked, watching him frame out a storage closet. YouTube, he said dryly, and 15 years of fixing everything myself because calling someone wasn't an option. They worked late into the nights, too exhausted to talk much, existing in that companionable silence that had defined their relationship for years. Except now it felt different. Now when their hands brushed passing tools, Mara felt it. When Rowan stood close to show her how to brace a shelf properly, she was aware of his presence in a way that made her skin warm. She tried not to think about it, tried to stay focused on the work. But it was getting harder. One night, they were alone in the new space, assembling the last of the display cases. It was past midnight. They were both running on coffee and stubbornness. Hand me the level, Rowan said, not looking up from his work. Mara grabbed it, stepped closer to pass it to him. Their fingers touched, and neither of them pulled away. Rowan looked up, and the expression in his eyes made Mara's breath catch. Mara, he said quietly. Don't. She whispered. Not yet. Not until... She gestured vaguely at the unfinished space. Not until we know if this is going to work. Why does that matter? Because if this fails, if we lose everything, I don't want... Her voice broke. I don't want to have one more thing that I failed at. Rowan set down his tools, turned to face her fully. You think this is something you could fail at? He asked. Us? I don't know. Mara's honesty felt raw. I've never been good at this. At letting people close. At trusting they'll stay when things get hard. Things are already hard, Rowan pointed out. I'm still here. For now. For as long as you want me. The words hung between them, heavy with promise. Mara wanted to believe him, wanted to take that leap, but fear was a powerful thing. Ask me again, she said, when the bakery opens. When we know if this works, then I'll... She swallowed. Then I'll be ready. Rowan studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Okay, he said, but I'm holding you to that. The grand opening of the new Mara's bakery happened on a cold Monday morning in late October.
The space was ready, the ovens heated, the bread rising. Mara stood behind the new counter, hands shaking, and wondered if anyone would come. At 6 a.m., the door opened. Old Gerald shuffled in, moving slow like always. "Heard you moved," he grunted. "Took me 20 minutes to find the damn place." Mara's throat closed. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just give me the rye." He was followed by Sarah Chen, then Tom Fletcher's daughter, then a handful of others. People who'd been coming to her bakery for years, who'd followed her to this new location out of loyalty or stubbornness, or something that looked a lot like faith. By noon, the shop was full. Not packed, not overflowing, but full enough. Mara moved through the space in a daze, serving customers, answering questions, accepting congratulations. Rowan worked the back, keeping the ovens fed, making sure they didn't run out of bread. It was working. Against all odds, against Nathaniel's money and influence, against the weight of expectations and the fear of failure, it was working. As the afternoon lull set in and the last customers trickled out, Mara found Rowan in the back, leaning against the counter with his eyes closed. "We did it," she said. He opened his eyes. "Yeah, we did." Mara crossed to him slowly, her heart hammering. "You said to ask again," she started, "when the bakery opened, when we knew if it would work." Rowan straightened, suddenly alert. "Mara, it's working," she continued. "We're here. We survived. And I think—" She took a breath. "I think I'm ready to stop being scared." Scared of what? Of this. Of you. Of wanting something that might not last. Rowan's expression softened. "What if it does last?" "Then I'm an idiot for waiting this long." She stepped closer. He met her halfway. The kiss was awkward at first, too much pressure, wrong angle, both of them clearly out of practice. But then Rowan's hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite the calluses, and Mara leaned into it, and suddenly it didn't matter that it wasn't perfect. It mattered that it was real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. 5 years, he said. "I've been wanting to do that for 5 years. Why didn't you?" "Because you needed space more than you needed another person making demands." Mara's eyes burned. "I don't need space anymore." "Good." His almost smile was back. "Because I don't think I can go back to just buying bread and leaving." She laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Outside, Silver Hollow went about its business. Nathaniel's bakery stood on Main Street, polished and perfect and ultimately empty of the thing that mattered. Connection. Care, the stubborn refusal to become something you're not. Mara had chosen herself, had chosen to fight, and in fighting, she'd found someone who chose to fight with her. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The battle wasn't over. Nathaniel was still out there, still scheming, still waiting for them to fail. But standing in her new bakery, Rowan's arms around her, the smell of fresh bread in the air, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt possible. The honeymoon period lasted exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks of steady customers, reliable sales, and the kind of cautious optimism that felt dangerous to acknowledge out loud. 3 weeks of Mara and Rowan learning to navigate what they'd become. Partners in business, something more than that in private. 3 weeks before Nathaniel reminded them that wounded pride was more dangerous than open warfare. It started small. A food blogger showed up one morning, young and earnest, with a camera and questions about Mara's artisanal approach. She bought 3 different loaves, took pictures of everything, promised a glowing review. The review went live 2 days later on a popular regional blog. It was glowing, all right, for Cross Bakery. The post praised Nathaniel's commitment to quality and professional standards, complete with professional photos of his gleaming shop. Mara's bakery got mentioned once, in passing, as a local establishment struggling to maintain relevance in an evolving market. Struggling to maintain relevance. Mara read the line 5 times, each time feeling it cut deeper. "It's one blogger," Rowan said, reading over her shoulder. "Nobody cares what one person thinks." But 2 days later, a similar article appeared in the Silver Hollow Gazette. Then another in the Billings paper. All of them singing Nathaniel's praises while dismissing Mara's work as quaint but outdated. Someone was orchestrating this. Paying for it, probably. "He's buying good press," Mara said, staring at the stack of articles. making himself look like the future while painting me as the past. Let him. Rowan was fixing a loose hinge on the storage closet, his tone matter of fact. Words don't change what you're doing. Words change what people think I'm doing. Mara gestured at the articles. Perception matters, Rowan. If everyone believes I'm outdated and irrelevant, eventually they'll stop coming. The people who matter know better. The people who matter aren't enough to keep me in business. The argument felt familiar now. Rowan's stubborn faith in doing good work and letting results speak for themselves. Mara's pragmatic understanding that sometimes good work wasn't enough. They'd been having variations of this fight for weeks, always ending in stalemate. But this time felt different. Higher stakes. That night, Mara lay awake in her apartment, still above the cobbler's shop, though she'd been thinking about finding something closer to the new bakery, and stared at the ceiling. Rowan had offered to stay. Had been offering every night for the past week, never pushing, just making it clear the option was there. She kept saying no. Not because she didn't want him there, because she did, and that terrified her. Wanting things had never worked out well for Mara Ellison. Wanting made you vulnerable, made you dependent. And when the thing you wanted disappeared, because it always did eventually, you were left with a hole shaped like hope. Better to keep some distance, some protection, even if it meant sleeping alone. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. Mara's flour supplier, a company she'd worked with for 5 years, sent a letter. They were discontinuing her account. Something about restructuring their client base and focusing on higher volume operations. The timing was suspicious. The reasoning transparent. Nathaniel had gotten to them too. I can find another supplier, Mara told Rowan, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. There are other companies. How long will that take? I don't know. A week? 2? And in the meantime? I'll buy from the general store. It's more expensive and lower quality, but it'll work temporarily. Except it didn't work. The general store's flour was fine for home baking, terrible for professional use. The bread came out wrong, texture off, flavor flat. Customers noticed. This doesn't taste the same, old Gerald said, frowning at his rye. New supplier, Mara admitted. Temporary situation. Well, fix it. He bought the bread anyway, but his disappointment lingered. Mara tried 3 different suppliers over the next week. 2 weren't taking new clients. The third offered to sell to her at twice the normal rate. That's price gouging, Rowan said flatly. That's what happens when Nathaniel makes calls, Mara corrected. He's got connections, money, influence. He can blacklist me without even trying hard. She took the expensive flour because she had no choice, but it ate into her already thin margins, turning profitable days into break-even ones. The financial pressure started building again. Different than before, but just as relentless. One night, going over the books, Mara realized she couldn't make rent and restock supplies in the same month. She'd have to choose. Rowan found her at the kitchen table, head in her hands, surrounded by receipts and invoices and the arithmetic of failure. How bad? He asked quietly. Bad. Mara didn't look up. I can cover rent or I can buy flour, not both. I can... No. She cut him off. You've already given everything you had. I can't keep taking from you. It's not taking if I'm offering. It is when I can't pay you back. Mara finally looked at him. And I can't, Rowan. Even if business picks up, even if everything goes perfectly, I'm so far in the hole now that I'll be paying this off for years. So we'll pay it off for years. We. Mara heard the word and felt something twist in her chest. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Is it? She stood up, pacing the small kitchen. Or are you just being noble, helping the struggling baker out of some misplaced sense of obligation? Rowan's expression went hard. You think that's what this is? I don't know what this is. The words came out sharper than she intended. We kissed once. We worked together. You sleep here sometimes, but we've never actually talked about what we're doing, what this means. What do you want it to mean? Mara stopped, frustrated. I want to know if you're staying because you want to or because you feel sorry for me. The silence that followed felt like a chasm. Rowan stood slowly, crossed to where she was standing. I grew up in a house where my father hit my mother when he drank, he said quietly, which was most nights. I joined the army to get away from it, spent 3 years in a desert watching people die, came home broken and angry and so full of noise I couldn't think straight. Mara's throat closed. He'd never told her this, never told her anything about the before. I went up that mountain because I couldn't be around people without wanting to hurt someone or myself, Rowan continued. Spent 15 years learning to be quiet again, learning to exist without the rage, and I thought that was enough. Thought I'd stay up there until I died, and that would be fine. He took a breath. Then I met you, he said, and for the first time in my entire life, being around another person didn't make me want to disappear. You made silence feel like company instead of isolation. Made me think maybe I could exist in the world again without breaking. Mara couldn't breathe. So no, Rowan's voice was firm now. I'm not here because I feel sorry for you. I'm here because you're the first thing in 20 years that's made me want to stay. The words hit like a fist to the chest. Mara looked at this man who'd quietly rearranged his entire life around helping her, who'd given up his solitude and his savings and his safety, and felt her defenses crack. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared you'll wake up one day and realize this isn't worth it, that I'm not worth it. I'm scared you'll never believe that you are. They stood there in her kitchen, years of self-protection and trauma between them, and Mara made a choice. She closed the distance, put her arms around him, let herself be held. Stay, she said. Not just tonight. Stay. Rowan's arms tightened around her. Okay. It wasn't a solution to their problems, didn't fix the financial crisis or stop Nathaniel's assault, but it was something. It was them choosing each other despite the odds. The pressure kept building. A week later, Mara's landlord, Patterson's son, who'd taken over the property management, came by with news. The building next door had been purchased.
They were planning renovations, loud ones, starting immediately. How long will the construction last? Mara asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. 3 months, maybe 4. He looked apologetic. I know it's not ideal, but there's nothing I can do about it. 3 months of jackhammers and drilling right next to her bakery. It wasn't illegal, probably wasn't even intentional, but it was perfectly timed. The construction started the next Monday. The noise was catastrophic, loud enough to rattle the windows, constant enough to drive customers away. People came in, winced at the sound, and left. Sales dropped 30% in the first week, 40% in the second. Mara tried everything, offered discounts, extended hours, even considered closing during the worst of the construction and reopening in the evenings. Nothing worked. By the 3rd week, she was hemorrhaging money faster than she could count. This is it, she told Rowan one night, too exhausted to cry anymore. This is how he wins. Not with competition or bad press. With construction noise. We could move again, Rowan offered, but his voice lacked conviction. With what money? Mara gestured at the ledger. I can barely afford flour. Moving is impossible. Then we waited out. For 3 months? 4? I'll be bankrupt in 6 weeks. They sat in silence, the weight of inevitability pressing down. Mara thought about that contract she'd torn in half, about the money she'd refused, about how much easier everything would be if she'd just said yes, if she'd just agreed to become someone else. I could still go to him, she said quietly. Nathaniel. He made another offer. Lower than the first, but still substantial. I could take it, sell him the recipes, work for him. You'd hate it, Rowan said. I'd survive it. That's not the same thing. No. Mara looked at her hands. Scarred, strong, capable hands that were about to lose everything they'd built. But maybe survival is all we get. Rowan was quiet for a long time. When I was in the desert, he finally said, I watched a lot of people survive things. Attacks, injuries, the heat. They made it home, got medical care, went back to their lives. He paused. But some of them, he continued, they survived wrong. Came home so damaged by what they'd endured that they weren't really alive anymore. Just going through motions. And I remember thinking that was worse than dying. Being alive, but empty. Mara looked at him. If you take his offer, Rowan said, you'll survive. But you'll do it wrong. You'll be alive and empty, and I don't... His voice cracked. I don't want to watch that happen to you. Then what do I do? Mara's voice broke. Tell me what to do, Rowan, because I'm out of ideas. You fight until you can't anymore, and then you let me fight with you. You've been fighting with me. No. He met her eyes. I've been helping. There's a difference. Before Mara could ask what he meant, the door to the bakery burst open. Sarah Chen stood there, breathing hard like she'd been running. There's a town meeting, she said, tomorrow night, about Nathaniel's bakery. Mara's stomach dropped. What about it? Margaret Voss called it, said they're voting on whether to give Cross Bakery some kind of official town endorsement, make it the preferred vendor for all town events, which would essentially kill Mara's business. Official endorsements carried weight. Once Cross Bakery became the town's chosen vendor, everyone else would fall in line. Can they do that? Rowan asked. Town council can vote on whatever they want. Sarah's expression was grim. And Margaret's been organizing. She's got support. Of course she does, Mara said bitterly. Nathaniel's probably paying her. Maybe. Sarah stepped closer. But you should come anyway. Make your case. Some people still support you. Some isn't most. No, but it's something. After Sarah left, Mara and Rowan sat in the bakery, surrounded by the smell of bread and the sound of their own breathing. I can't go to that meeting, Mara said. I can't stand up in front of the whole town and watch them choose him over me. Then don't go. She looked at him, surprised. I'll go, Rowan said. I'll make the case. Rowan, you hate crowds, hate talking to people. This would be torture for you. Yeah. His jaw was set. But watching them destroy you would be worse. Mara felt something crack open in her chest. This man who could barely function in social situations was offering to walk into a room full of people and speak for her. Because he loved her. He hadn't said it. Probably wouldn't say it for months, maybe years. But she could feel it in every action, every sacrifice, every stubborn refusal to let her fight alone. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The town meeting happened in the community hall, the same place they held elections and holiday celebrations. Mara sat in the back, hood up, trying to be invisible. Rowan stood near the front, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. The hall was packed. Margaret Voss presided from the front table, looking pleased with herself. We're here to discuss a resolution, Margaret began, to officially endorse Cross Bakery as Silver Hollow's preferred vendor for all municipal events. Mr. Cross has been an exemplary member of our business community, and I believe this endorsement would benefit the entire town. Mara's hands clenched in her lap. Nathaniel stood, gave a polished speech about community investment and quality standards, and his commitment to Silver Hollow's future. The town ate it up. Then Margaret called for discussion. Rowan stood. The room went quiet. Not many people in Silver Hollow had heard Rowan speak more than a few words at a time. I'm not good at this, he started, and his voice was rough, uncomfortable. Talking to crowds, making arguments, but I need to say something. Margaret looked annoyed. Mr. Hale, if you have concerns about the resolution, I have concerns about what it represents, Rowan interrupted. You're voting to endorse a business that's been here 6 weeks over one that's been feeding this town for 5 years. Cross Bakery offers superior... Cross Bakery offers flash. Rowan's voice got stronger. Nice displays and professional marketing. But it doesn't offer what Mara's bakery does. It doesn't know your names. Doesn't remember your kids' birthdays or your dead wife's favorite pastry. Patterson, sitting in the middle of the room, shifted uncomfortably. When Gerald's wife died, Rowan continued, Mara stayed up all night baking food for the funeral. Didn't charge him. Didn't ask for recognition. Just did it because it needed doing. That's very touching, Margaret said with false sweetness. But we're discussing business standards. I'm discussing what actually matters. Rowan's hands were shaking now, but his voice stayed firm. You want to endorse the bakery that treats you like customers. That's fine. That's your choice. But don't pretend it's about quality. It's about wanting someone who makes you feel refined and important instead of someone who just makes you feel cared for. The room was silent. Mara Ellison has bled for this town, Rowan said.
given everything she has to make sure you have bread in the morning and cake for your celebrations. She's been mocked and dismissed and told to change herself for years, and she kept showing up anyway, kept baking, kept caring, and now you're going to vote to replace her with someone who showed up 6 weeks ago with money and a smile. Mr. Hale, Margaret tried to interrupt. I'm not done. Rowan's voice cut through the room. You vote for this endorsement? You're telling everyone in Silver Hollow that money matters more than loyalty, that flash matters more than substance, that being new and polished is worth more than 5 years of actual service. He paused, and Mara could see how much this was costing him, how much effort it took to stand there, exposed, in front of dozens of watching eyes. So vote, Rowan finished, but know what you're really voting for. He sat down, trembling. The silence stretched out. Then old Gerald stood. I've been eating Mara's bread for 5 years, he said in his gruff voice. Tried the fancy place. It's fine, but it's not hers. And Rowan's right. She's been good to this town. Seems wrong to toss her aside for something shiny. Sarah Chen stood next. I second that. Then Tom Fletcher, then Patterson, then a dozen others scattered throughout the room. Not everyone, not even close to half. But enough. Margaret called for the vote. The resolution failed by 3 votes. Mara sat in the back of the hall, tears streaming down her face as the meeting dissolved into murmurs and arguments. Rowan found her in the parking lot afterward, leaning against the building, trying to catch her breath. You did it, she said. You actually did it. We did it. He pulled her close. And we're not done yet. The construction noise continued. The financial pressure didn't ease. Nathaniel didn't disappear. But something had shifted. The town had chosen her, not unanimously, not overwhelmingly, but enough. And for the first time since this fight started, Mara felt like maybe they could actually win, not through being perfect, not through having more resources or better connections, but through being real, through caring when it would have been easier to quit, through having someone who believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. That night, Mara and Rowan climbed up to his cabin, away from the noise and pressure and endless struggle. They sat on the porch, looking at the valley below, and Mara let herself feel something she'd been afraid to acknowledge. Gratitude. Not for victory, they hadn't won yet, but for the fight itself, for finding out what she was capable of when pushed to the edge. For learning that love wasn't about finding someone who made life easy. It was about finding someone who made the hard parts worth enduring. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing me. For staying. For fighting when I wanted to quit. Rowan pulled her closer, and they sat there in the mountain silence, 2 broken people who'd somehow found a way to be whole together. The battle wasn't over, but they were still standing, and that was enough for tonight. The construction noise ended on a Tuesday in early December, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Mara arrived at the bakery that morning, braced for the usual assault of jackhammers and drilling, and found silence instead. The crew next door was gone. The equipment packed up. A sign on the building announced completion. She stood there on the sidewalk, waiting for relief to hit. It didn't come. Because the damage was already done. 3 months of constant noise had carved a trench through her customer base. People had found other routines, other places to buy their bread. Some had drifted to Cross Bakery and never drifted back. Others just stopped buying fresh bread altogether. Mara's daily sales had stabilized at about 60% of what they'd been before the construction, enough to keep the doors open, not enough to climb out of debt. She was surviving, but barely. And survival without progress was just slow death. Rowan found her standing there, staring at the silent building next door. It's over, he said. The noise is over, Mara corrected. The rest of it isn't. They went inside, started the ovens, mixed the dough, fell into the routine that had become their life, work and worry in equal measure, held together by stubborn refusal to quit. But Mara could feel something shifting inside her, a kind of exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. She'd been fighting for so long, and she was tired. That night, counting receipts that barely covered expenses, Mara made a decision she'd been avoiding for months. I need to sell, she said. Rowan looked up from the inventory he was checking. Sell what? The business, the equipment, whatever I can get for it. Her voice came out flat, drained.
I can't keep doing this. Can't keep bleeding money and pretending it's sustainable. We're still here, Rowan said, still operating. Barely. Mara gestured at the ledger. I'm 3 months behind on rent. I owe you more money than I can count. The equipment is falling apart, and I can't afford to fix it. This isn't a business anymore, Rowan. It's just expensive failure. So we adjust, cut more costs, find new revenue. There's nothing left to cut. The words came out sharper than she intended. I've cut everything. I work 18-hour days. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I eat day-old bread and whatever you bring me because I can't afford groceries, and it's still not enough. Rowan set down the inventory sheet. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done. Mara's voice cracked. I'm saying I fought as hard as I could, and I still lost. And I need to accept that before I drag you down with me. You're not dragging me anywhere. I chose this. You chose wrong. Mara looked at him, this man who'd given up everything to help her fight an unwinnable war. You should have stayed on the mountain, should have kept your money and your peace and your life. Instead, you're here, in this mess, because I was too proud to quit when I should have. Mara, I'm selling to Nathaniel. The words came out quiet but final. He's made 3 offers since the construction started, each one lower than the last. The most recent one is insulting, but it's enough to pay off my debts and give you back some of what you've put in. Rowan's expression went hard. I don't want the money back. Well, you're getting it anyway. Mara stood, started cleaning the already clean counter, anything to avoid looking at him. I'm meeting with him tomorrow, signing whatever he wants me to sign, and then I'm done. And then what? Rowan's voice was tight. You just give up? Let him win? He already won, Rowan, months ago. I've just been too stubborn to admit it. The silence that followed felt like a door closing. Rowan grabbed his coat, headed for the exit. Where are you going? Mara asked. For a walk. He didn't look back. Need to clear my head before I say something we'll both regret. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that felt louder than slamming. Mara stood alone in the bakery, surrounded by the smell of bread and the wreckage of her dreams, and let herself cry. She'd fought so hard, given everything she had, and it still hadn't been enough. The meeting with Nathaniel was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning at his bakery. Mara arrived 5 minutes early, wearing the same blue dress she'd worn to that disastrous dinner months ago. It felt like putting on armor that didn't fit anymore. Nathaniel's bakery was busier than she expected. A steady flow of customers, efficient service, everything running like a machine. She hated how good it looked. Nathaniel met her in his office, a real office, with a desk and filing cabinets and framed awards on the wall. Miss Ellison. His smile was professional, almost kind. I'm glad you reached out. Let's just get this over with, Mara said. He slid the contract across the desk. She'd seen drafts before, but this one was different. Simpler. More direct. He was buying her recipes, her equipment, and her lease. In exchange, she'd receive enough money to clear her debts with a small amount left over. She could work for Cross Bakery if she wanted, standard employee wages, or walk away entirely. You're being generous, Mara said, surprised despite herself. I'm being fair. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. You fought hard, Miss Ellison. Harder than I expected. That deserves some respect, even in defeat. The word stung. Defeat. Because that's what this was. There's one condition, Nathaniel continued. You sign a non-compete. Can't open another bakery within 100 miles for 5 years. Mara laughed, bitter. You think I'd try again after this? I think you're more resilient than you give yourself credit for. His expression was unreadable, but I need the protection anyway. She stared at the contract, at the line waiting for her signature. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and moving toward for months. All she had to do was sign. The door to the office burst open. Sarah Chen stood there, breathless, with Tom Fletcher right behind her. Don't sign that, Sarah said. Nathaniel's expression tightened. This is a private meeting. She needs to hear this first. Tom pushed past Sarah, dropped a folder on the desk. We've been doing some research about cross-hospitality ventures. Mara's heart was pounding. What kind of research? The kind that shows Nathaniel isn't who he claims to be, Sarah said. He's done this before, 6 times in the past 10 years. finds small towns, identifies successful local businesses, opens competing locations, and crushes the competition through any means necessary. That's business, Nathaniel said coldly. That's predatory, Tom corrected. And in at least 3 cases, it was illegal. Bribery, intimidation. In one town, he paid off health inspectors to target a competitor. Mara's stomach dropped. The inspection. You orchestrated that. Nathaniel's silence was answer enough. We've got documentation, Sarah continued, pulling papers from the folder. Emails, financial records, enough to file complaints with the State Business Bureau and possibly press criminal charges. You're bluffing, Nathaniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try us. Tom's expression was grim. You've been bleeding Mara dry for months through illegal means. That ends now. Nathaniel looked at Mara, then at the contract, then back at Sarah and Tom. What do you want? He asked carefully. We want you gone, Sarah said. Pack up, close your bakery, leave Silver Hollow. And if I refuse? Then we take everything we've found to the authorities. Tom tapped the folder. Your operation here gets investigated. Your other locations probably get investigated too. And even if you survive the legal trouble, your reputation gets destroyed. Is Silver Hollow really worth that? The calculation played out across Nathaniel's face. Mara could see him weighing options, running numbers, deciding if this particular fight was worth the cost. I've invested significant capital in this location, he finally said. You'll recover, Tom said flatly. You always do. That's how this works, right? Win some, lose some, move on to the next target. Nathaniel stood, buttoned his jacket. I'll need 2 weeks to close down operations properly. You have one, Sarah said. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Nathaniel picked up the unsigned contract, tore it in half, and dropped it in the trash. Fine. His professional mask slipped, showing the anger underneath. But don't fool yourselves into thinking you've won anything. This town is dying, has been for years. I was offering a future. Now you're stuck with the past. He walked out of his own office, leaving the 3 of them standing there. Mara's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the chair, shaking. How did you find all this? She asked. Rowan, Tom said. He came to us last night, said you were giving up, and we needed to give you a reason not to. So we started digging, called in some favors. One of my cousins works in the state attorney's office. He helped us access public records. Rowan did this, Mara repeated numbly. He did. Sarah's expression softened. He loves you, Mara. Anyone with eyes can see it, and he wasn't about to let you surrender without one last fight. Mara stood on shaking legs. Where is he? Last I saw, heading up the mountain. She ran. The climb up to Rowan's cabin had never felt longer. Mara's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she kept pushing. She had to find him, had to tell him what happened, had to say all the things she should have said months ago instead of holding them back out of fear. She found him on the porch, staring at the valley like he was trying to memorize it. You're leaving, Mara said, breathless. Rowan turned, surprise and something else crossing his face. You signed the contract. I didn't. She climbed the porch steps. Sarah and Tom stopped me, showed me what you found, what you did. It was nothing. It was everything. Mara's voice broke. You spent all night digging through records and calling in favors and building a case, even though I'd already told you I was quitting. Because you don't quit, Rowan said quietly. You just get tired sometimes. There's a difference. I was ready to surrender, ready to let him win. I know. He looked at his hands. That's why I had to do something, had to give you one more reason to keep fighting. Mara stepped closer. You could have told me. We could have done it together. You needed rest more than you needed another battle. Rowan's almost smile flickered. Besides, I'm better at research than speeches. Let me play to my strengths. She wanted to argue, wanted to be mad at him for making decisions without her, but all she felt was overwhelming gratitude. Nathaniel's leaving, she said, closing his bakery. We won. You won, Rowan corrected. I just helped. No. Mara took his hand. We won, together, because that's what we are, together. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. I've been scared, Mara admitted, scared of needing you,
scared of what happens when this falls apart. But last night, when you left, I realized something." "What?" "That being alone hurts worse than risking being hurt." She squeezed his hand. "I've spent my whole life protecting myself from disappointment by never letting anyone close enough to disappoint me. And I'm done. I'm done being scared of wanting things." "What do you want?" Rowan asked quietly. "You, this, us." The words came easier than she expected. "I want to build something real with you, not just the bakery, a life. I want to wake up next to you and fight with you and make terrible decisions together. I want all of it." Rowan pulled her close, and Mara let herself be held without reservation. "I can't promise it'll be easy," she said against his chest. "I'm stubborn and scared, and I'll probably keep trying to push you away when things get hard." "I know." "And the bakery's still struggling. Nathaniel leaving doesn't fix our financial problems." "I know that too." "So why are you smiling?" "Because you said us." His arms tightened around her. "You said we. That's all I've wanted to hear for 5 years." They stood there on the porch, two damaged people who'd found each other in the wreckage, and Mara felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, not because the future was certain, but because, for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing it alone. Cross Bakery closed its doors 2 weeks before Christmas. Nathaniel left without ceremony, his gleaming shop emptied and locked overnight. The building sat vacant, a monument to the war that had almost destroyed Mara. But something unexpected happened in the aftermath. People came back. Not immediately, not in a flood, but slowly, steadily, the customers who'd drifted to Nathaniel's operation started returning. Some looked sheepish, others defiant. Most just acted like they'd never left. "Heard Cross closed down," old Gerald said on his first morning back. "Guess I'm stuck with you again." "Lucky me," Mara said, but she was smiling. By January, her sales had climbed back to 75% of pre-construction levels. By February, 85%. It wasn't a miracle, wasn't overnight success. It was slow, hard-earned progress, the kind that lasted. Mara started implementing some of Rowan's earlier suggestions, focusing more on the specialty items, the things nobody else made. The wild huckleberry sourdough became a signature item. The honey oat bread with wild thyme developed a following. She started offering pre-orders for custom items, charging premium prices that people actually paid. Slowly, the financial pressure eased. She paid Tom Fletcher back first. He'd fronted money for legal fees when they'd compiled the case against Nathaniel. Then Sarah, who'd covered several supply orders when Mara couldn't. Then Patterson's son, catching up on the months of back rent. And finally, Rowan. He refused to take it at first. "It was a gift," he said, "not a loan." "It was an investment," Mara corrected, "and investments get returns." They compromised. She paid him half, and they put the other half into a joint account. For emergencies. For the future. For the life they were building. Spring came to Silver Hollow with the usual mess. Mud and rain, and the mountain snow melting into rushing streams. The bakery needed a new roof. The ovens needed maintenance. Mara's apartment lease was up, and she needed to decide whether to renew or find something else. Life kept happening, with all its complications and demands. But Mara faced it differently now. She moved into Rowan's cabin in April. Not because she had to, not because it was practical, because she wanted to wake up to the mountain quiet and the smell of pine and the presence of someone who saw her completely and chose her anyway. They fell into a new routine, spending nights at the cabin, mornings at the bakery. Rowan split his time between helping her and returning to his trapping, finding a balance between solitude and connection that worked for both of them. It wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes, had bad days where Mara's stubbornness clashed with Rowan's silence, and they both retreated to separate corners. But they came back together. Always. Because perfect wasn't the point. The point was choosing each other, again and again, even when it was hard. One morning in late May, Mara was prepping dough when Margaret Voss walked in. She hadn't been to the bakery since before the town meeting, hadn't spoken to Mara in months. "Margaret," Mara said carefully. "Mara." Margaret looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for her. I owe you an apology."
Mara's hand stilled in the flour. I supported Nathaniel, Margaret continued, pushed for that endorsement, made it harder for you when you were already struggling. And I did it because I thought progress meant something shiny and new, thought Silver Hollow needed to become something different to survive. And now? Mara asked. Now I think I was wrong. Margaret's voice was quiet. Nathaniel's bakery was beautiful, professional, everything I thought we needed, but it was empty. Nobody knew my name there. Nobody cared that I'd lived in this town for 40 years. I was just another customer. She paused. You've always known my name, Margaret said. Even when I was rude, even when I made things difficult. You still remembered that I liked the small cinnamon rolls and that my late husband preferred rye. And I took that for granted. Mara didn't know what to say. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Margaret continued. Just wanted you to know that I was wrong, and I'm glad you're still here. She bought 2 small cinnamon rolls and left before Mara could respond. Rowan emerged from the back room, having clearly overheard. That was unexpected, he said. Yeah. Mara stared at the door Margaret had left through. People keep surprising me lately. Is that good or bad? Good, I think. She went back to the dough, kneading with practiced ease. Means I was wrong about some things too. Wrong about this town, about people, about how much they actually cared. You were protecting yourself, Rowan said. Can't blame you for that. No, but I can do better. And she did. Mara started really seeing her customers again, not as sources of revenue or validation, but as people. She remembered Sarah's stories about difficult students and offered sympathy instead of just pastries. She asked Tom about his daughter and actually listened to the answer. She learned old Gerald's first name after 5 years of just calling him Gerald. She stopped treating her bakery like a fortress and started treating it like what it had always been meant to be. A community space. A place where people felt cared for. The business grew, but not in the way Nathaniel had envisioned. No expansion, no franchising, no professional branding, just good work, done honestly, by someone who gave a damn. And it turned out that was enough. Summer brought tourists, people passing through on their way to Yellowstone or Glacier, looking for authentic Montana experiences. They found Mara's bakery and its wild huckleberry sourdough and its honey oat bread, and they told their friends. A food magazine out of Seattle sent a photographer. The article called Mara's operation a testament to artisanal perseverance in an age of corporate homogenization. Mara hung the article on the wall, not because she needed the validation, but because it made old Gerald laugh every time he tried to pronounce homogenization. By August, she'd finally paid off all her debts. All of them. She made the last payment to Rowan on a Tuesday morning, handing him a check that represented months of careful saving. We're even, she said. He looked at the check, then at her. We were never uneven. You know what I mean? Yeah. He folded the check, slipped it in his pocket. But I'm still cashing this and putting it in that joint account, for emergencies. Or for something good, Mara suggested. We've been planning for disasters for so long. Maybe it's time to plan for something else. Like what? She'd been thinking about this for weeks. Like expanding. Not the business, the building. Add a kitchen in back so I can do more prep work. Maybe a small seating area. Nothing fancy. Just room to grow. Rowan's almost smile broke into something bigger. That sounds good. They built the addition that fall. Rowan did most of the carpentry himself with help from Tom and a few others who'd decided Mara's success was worth investing in. The work was slow, careful, built to last. The new kitchen was functional, not beautiful. The seating area held exactly 6 people, and the chairs didn't match. It was perfect. On the first morning the addition was open, Mara made coffee, real coffee, not the cheap stuff, and set out a basket of fresh rolls. Sarah came first, sitting at one of the mismatched chairs with her stack of papers to grade. Then Patterson, who'd started coming in for breakfast after his son had mentioned how much better Mara's place was than eating alone. Then others, drawn by the smell and the warmth and the feeling that this was a place they belonged. Mara moved through the space, refilling coffee, delivering food, and realized something that felt important. This was what she'd been trying to build all along. Not a business, not a reputation, just a place where people could exist without having to be anything other than themselves.
a place where being enough was actually enough. That night, sitting on the cabin porch with Rowan, watching the sun set over the valley, Mara thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the rejection, all the fighting, all the moments she'd wanted to quit. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Coming down from this mountain? Getting involved in all this mess?" Rowan was quiet for a moment. "No. You? Regret fighting Nathaniel, refusing his money?" Mara considered. "Sometimes I think about how much easier it would have been to just say yes, to take the money and change myself and let him turn me into something marketable. But then I wouldn't be me anymore." She leaned against him. "And turns out, being me is kind of the whole point." "Yeah," Rowan said quietly. "It is." They sat in comfortable silence, and Mara felt something she'd never quite felt before. Contentment, not happiness. That was too simple, too fleeting. But contentment, the deep knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing, with exactly the person she was supposed to be with. It had taken 32 years and a war with a vindictive businessman, and more failure than she could count. But she'd finally found it. Winter came again to Silver Hollow, and with it, the rhythms Mara had learned to depend on. The bakery stayed warm while the world outside froze. Customers came in shaking off snow, grateful for the heat and the bread and the feeling of being welcome. Rowan spent more time in town now, less time alone on the mountain. He'd built a small workshop behind the bakery where he did carpentry and repairs, finding a way to exist in the world without being overwhelmed by it. They were building a life, imperfect, complicated, real. One morning in late December, Mara looked around the bakery, at the mismatched furniture, the worn counters, the customers who knew her name and she knew theirs, and felt something profound. Pride. Not the defensive kind, not the stubborn refusal to admit defeat, but genuine pride in what she'd built, what they'd built, a place that mattered. Not because it was successful or refined or worthy of magazine articles, but because it was honest, because it cared. Because in a world that kept demanding people become smaller, quieter, more palatable versions of themselves, this bakery stood as proof that you could be exactly who you were and still matter. That survival didn't require surrender. That strength wasn't about becoming what the world demanded. It was about having the courage to remain exactly who you were, even when everything conspired to change you. Rowan came up behind her, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That we won," Mara said. "Not because we beat Nathaniel, because we didn't lose ourselves." "Best kind of winning." "Yeah." She turned in his arms. "It is." They stood there in the bakery that smelled like bread and hope, two people who'd fought for the right to be themselves, and Mara understood something fundamental. The story wasn't about beating the villain or getting the money or achieving some perfect ending. It was about choosing yourself, again and again, even when choosing yourself was the hardest thing you could do. It was about finding someone who made that choice easier. It was about building something real in a world that preferred fake. And it was about understanding that true power didn't come from being what everyone else wanted. It came from having the courage to be exactly what you already were. Mara Ellison had spent most of her life being told she wasn't enough, not thin enough, not pretty enough, not refined enough. But standing in her bakery, in Rowan's arms, surrounded by the life they'd built together through sheer stubborn refusal to quit, she finally understood the truth. She'd always been enough. The world just hadn't been ready to see it, but now it did, and that made all the difference.